Welcome. A very warm welcome from Global Retreat Centre, Oxford, to a series of short talks, Deep Insights. A series of 30-minute talks by experienced meditators on various subjects. It will be followed by some questions, if you have any, which you can enter into our chat box, followed by a short reflection. Our topic tonight is attachment, detachment. The art of living is balance of both. And our speaker is Hodgson. He is a digital media designer, a sound technician and musician who currently is living and working at the Global Retreat Centre, Oxford. He has recorded and toured with many bands as a drummer, which has given him a glimpse into the creativity and connectivity of minds through the arts. So like you, I'm very interested to hear Al tonight. So over to you, Al.
Good evening. Hi there. Thanks for joining this evening. Hi, all right. So attachment and detachment. Well, I've been fortunate to visit India many times. And if you've ever been to India or seen it in documentaries, you may have been struck by the feeling of its vast antiquity and how rich in spiritual teachings and traditions it is. And from India, can I just check, can you hear me okay? Is that all okay? Yeah. From India, we get teachings of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Brahma Kumari's Raj Yoga. And one of the most important themes of them all is that of non-attachment. In India, there's an old method to catch monkeys that you may have heard of. That's to put nuts in a jar with a narrow neck, and the monkey is determined to hold on to the nuts so much that it just won't let go, regardless of what happens, and then it gets caught. It just won't let go of the grip. So that's a very good analogy for the attachment situation, is that kind of madness that goes with not wanting to let go of something because it seems so attractive, or that we couldn't do without it. So in the West, we tend to use the word detachment, which is slightly different from the more accurate non-attachment, as you'll hopefully see soon. So why is non-attachment considered so important in many spiritual teachings? In the Bhagavad Gita, which is roughly translated as the Song of God, the main protagonist, Arjuna, is facing the prospect of a terrible civil war that involves friends and family on both sides, and his attachment to them really clouds his ability to be able to see the complex situation with any real clarity. And this turmoil in his thoughts and his feelings result in confusion and his inability to do his job of leading his kingdom decisively. So he's desperate for guidance and strength. So he calls on God, and he receives guidance from God. And what does God tell him to do? He urges him to let go of his attachments to his friends and his relatives in order to stabilize, think clearly, and focus on his task of saving the kingdom. So we're all Arjuna in a way, because the story represents a spiritual battle that we all become aware of at some time or other. So from childhood, we try and make sense of objects, people, places, and we have a tendency to identify ourselves with those things in the belief that they make up a major part of who we think we are. We grasp and try and hold on to them, unknowingly hoping for security and happiness. So this is considered to be normal because most other people around us seem to agree that it's quite normal and not question it. But a little something nice can't be so bad, surely. Seems reasonable that If we want more of something that seems good, that seems to be a good strategy, surely. But thing is, we are highly adaptable and programmable, which is wonderful in some aspects, but it can lead to severe addictions, especially from early childhood. This programming, we're very, very susceptible to it. So all these ideas form our self-identity, which is very fragile and constructed of many facets. So it seems natural to want to hold tight and pretend and protect, should I say, our notion of the self. So this notion of the self that's sometimes referred to as the ego, and that's the thinking part of us that seems to be at the center of our conscious awareness. And also it's a feeling of maintaining a continuing sense of personal identity. So although our bodies are changing over time, we have this sense that we've always been ourselves. And this is largely the ego that maintains this idea and this for purpose of this stability. Interestingly, my dad has recently had a brain bleed. And so I'm observing some very interesting things in the way that his brain is able to make some connections and not make other connections. And his sense of self is sort of fluctuating, and his ability to hold on to ideas is sometimes there, sometimes not there. And so this sense of stability is very important to us, obviously. So once we start constructing this idea of ourselves, we then, in later life, we add things such as talents, accomplishments. We may have some kind of feeling of status, and then add more objects, more relationships, building and building and building in a bid to increase the breadth of our self-image and also satisfy our need for security. So these are all beliefs of the ego that may seem effective until they're challenged by people and situations. And this comes the tricky part, the challenge. So imagine a small child having a tantrum, we've all seen, and it can't have its own way. And if the parents don't set boundaries, it may be said the child becomes spoilt. So can an unspoilt person or child become unspoilt? And it's maybe through some tough life lessons that we can become unspoilt. Or possibly we can continue being spoiled, but with a clever intellect, we can mask this spoiltness, you could say. But this tends to break down under duress, where we can't really hide that cleverly when we're under pressure. So being seemingly clever in getting our own way may actually mean we set ourselves up for a lot of suffering later in life. And we also get stuck at a bit of an immature spiritual level. So kind of behaving like a young child, even though we're in an adult body. And that can be quite pathetic and sad to see. But still, we need to be compassionate because we can't see this clearly all the time. We all fail in this. And so it's important to have that understanding that we can't hold this self-identity together constantly. And sometimes we see this spoiled child having bullied themselves into some position of influence. But is that success or self-deception? If we let go or let down ego's guard and let in an attack or insult on one of these false facets, you could say, of self-identity, it can really hurt, though, really get to us. And the scene and the feelings both playing over repeatedly in our mind and causing havoc with our emotions. and even actually within our what's sometimes called our second brain, our gut. So we can actually become quite sick through this mulling over and repeating and playing back situations that cause this turmoil. I've really experienced that myself with problems with my gut through to suppressing these repeated thoughts, thinking that they're dealt with, but actually they still stay tumbling around inside, causing inflammation. Well, that's the way it feels to me anyway. So just like Arjuna, our intellect gets congested and confused, and we just can't think straight. So we may not be engaged in a civil war like Arjuna is on a big scale, but we're actually engaged on a small scale civil war within us, because our soul, wherever you feel that sense of center of the self is actually compromised by our attachments, mainly our likes and dislikes, our preferences, and our attempts, mainly pathetic, to protect that fragile self-identity. Just this week, I was caught out by an intense feeling of being insulted, actually, and the unfairness of it, and the concern of what others might think. And it was a really good reminder to keep a check on my inner world, especially as I was preparing for this talk. So you could say the experience was kind of ground into me by life, or as we say here in the Global Retreat Center, the drama. Sometimes it can be like we've lost something, maybe that can actually be replaced. But the thoughts and the feelings of the loss, even an anticipated loss, may keep replaying over and over in our imagination, maintaining that turmoil. So when we feel we've lost something from our own inner world, which is a very difficult idea to really understand, it can really get to us and cause this turmoil. So it could be our sense of self-esteem or our reputation. And this disturbance really ruins any possibility of the kind of stillness and clarity that we need to stay on any kind of spiritual path, you could say, or development, or even really just to be loving. So what would a spiritual master be like? Someone who can maybe have more control over the situation. It may be, you could say that a spiritual master is someone who really just can think straight, or someone who can maintain stillness or calmness, even in difficult situations. Maybe they're clear-minded and they have the wisdom to maintain this accurate perspective on life. Life being who they are and how they relate to others in the world around them. So it's very important to have the ability to put a full stop to these whirring thoughts and to get some context of what's going on. You could say it's a way of, we have to apply the brake to the tumbling thoughts. And once we can control the tumbling thoughts, we've got a chance to have some steadiness in our emotions as well. So the spiritual master may have this awareness to protect them from emotional suffering, and therefore give them the capacity to be calm and loving. Because after all, the central message of many great spiritual teachers is that we really need to love each other, which is maybe what we come here to learn. If we can shift our energy from our own little neediness, maybe we can create a capacity that can actually do some good to give what's needed to others, which is, of course, love. But that ego, that sense of pride, can sometimes stop us loving. And it's really kind of one or the other, which is why humility and love often go together. That sense of selflessness. So if attachment leads to suffering, as the Buddha said, its opposite, detachment, you could say, can lead to love by understanding our relationships so we don't grasp and stifle or strangle them. Now, we may have some knowledge of the workings of the inner self, but is that enough? It seems to me that it's only through experience that we develop this wisdom. Many times we have to endure seemingly unpleasant situations and learning experiences. And then we look back over the situations and we may see that actually we're on a continuous learning journey from that same little infant who was pushing and testing the boundaries and trying new strategies, still trying to find ways to present this false sense, this show, this performance of self-identity, mainly to gain some security. Now, for some people whose apparent success has been unusually fast, or those who've had near-death experiences, there can be a sense of seeing through these identifications and the emptiness of these temporary things, and can often lead for them to search for deeper meaning in life while they still have a chance. Unfortunately, for those with a slow accumulation of over-identifications, it can seem normal and go unnoticed, and then it may just be too late. The false self, the ego, fueled by the emotions, constantly be grasping for new comforts, objects, beliefs, identifications. Whereas the real self, the soul self, that's been subdued by the ego, has to come through and see this tendency and act quickly to loosen the grip on these identifications before they grow into over-identifications that will be so difficult to let go of. So this catching things before they go out of control requires a lot of attention, obviously. So sometimes these thoughts of unfairness just keep resonating over and over and over. And we continually replay a situation, maybe in order to understand it. But what if we don't understand it? What if we don't have that clear perspective of ourselves and our lives and what we're here for? We may just continually dig ourselves even deeper by going over and over the same misunderstandings and just create bad feelings for ourselves and develop a negative attitude. So in this drama, should I expect fairness? If I don't believe in karma, destiny, or meaning to life, then why should I expect fairness anyway? And if I do believe in karma or destiny, maybe some important life lessons will just have to be unpleasant so that I pay attention and then ultimately steer myself away from sorrow and towards what I really want, which is happiness and security. One great master, the Buddha, as I said earlier, famously said, attachment is the root of suffering. Another said, detachment doesn't mean that you shouldn't own anything, but nothing should own you. Another said, see the world as a stage, an endless drama, with actors all coming and going, playing their parts. So how do we maintain a balance? Is it actually possible to have a balance between attachment and detachment? I actually don't think it is really. I think it's more a case of a balance between non-attachment and responsibility or caring or loving. I don't think that attachment in itself, that holding on, that grasping, is only really relevant unless we're holding on to an accurate idea of ourselves, which is that of a loving, peaceful, stable, knowledgeful, wise being. And that's not like a grasping thing. That's more like a sense of stability, almost like a tower, if you like. So this discipline to maintain this observance of ourselves, it can seem to be quite rigid and maybe seem to be hard work. But if we see it rather like a wheel on an axle, that if it's too loose, it wobbles, and if it's too tight, it will squeak and won't turn smoothly. So we have to accept the lessons and pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, as they say, and get ready for the next lesson. We're all in obviously different levels of understanding and experiences, and we often, I think, have a very high expectation of others and expect them to be fully awake, fully aware, fully wise. Why are they doing this? Why don't they understand? But when we see ourselves and see how often we go into this misunderstanding and slip into complete delusion sometimes, that it's important to have that compassion and see that if I do that, then I shouldn't really have too high expectations from others, and just be more patient and tolerant. And of course, this requires power, and this power can only be available to us if we're not running our energy, our batteries, if you like, down constantly by maintaining this false self-image and trying to sustain something. This is why we need to look at it and try and dismantle the foolishness of aspects of our self-identity and just let them go. I don't need to pretend to be that anymore. It actually doesn't matter. It really is more important that I'm present and I have some loving capacity available. So if we could just pick something up for a while and play with it, put it down and then move on, that's no problem. It's that possessiveness that causes the sorrow. So I hope I drummed that in. Paul mentioned about me drumming earlier, so I've been drumming again tonight, drumming onto this, but this is really the main point as far as I see it. So this tolerance and forgiveness, these are all the central messages that we keep hearing again and again and again. And it's as much for ourselves as for others and the world around us, really, that we need to have this compassion and this tolerance and this mercy and try and keep our little pilot light illuminated. So I think that's all from me.
Okay.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you, Al. I've got a couple of questions. I hope it's all right. They've been tweeted in. John asks, how can I break someone's attachment to me when I feel it is too much? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I wanted to give a cheeky answer, like you could text them, but of course that wouldn't be the right way. But I don't know really how we can really do very much for others until they have that realization for themselves. I think there are things that I can do to make others dependent on me, And if I can do whatever I can to try and not promote that, I think that's probably the best I can do. And if I can have a proper conversation and try and talk about these matters in a very practical, normal way, then maybe it was something that can be taken up. But I think for all of us on this Zoom call, we've probably all woken up at the time where to these ideas when we needed to. I don't think we can really be forced to, and we just have to hope that those around us get the chance to hear some of these ideas before there are so many painful lessons that have to force them to be confronted by it.
Fantastic answer. Thank you, Al. Just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, please enter in the chat box. Sandra asks, how do you detach when you have attachment issues?
I would say to look at the main or the things that you can deal with, something that you can maybe chip away at, because we're all attached to so many things. We can't suddenly be the Buddha immediately. That would be a ridiculous idea to think we could just cut our attachments. But what we can do is change our perspective on these things, to look at where is this sorrow coming from? What is it that I'm expecting from someone else or something? What have I built some idea on that is really not realistic? And maybe I can shift this false idea into putting my energy into something that is a bit more permanent rather than a fragile sandcastle, if you like. It's a matter of looking into the self and just seeing what is it that's causing me the pain. What is it that this thing that is it really serving me, or is it just a habit? Is it a programming that has happened from maybe early childhood that I've never really looked at? Because I've been working a lot in IT for a long time, and this notion of programming is being very evident to me. And we have all sorts of different types of programmable devices to some extent. There are some things where we can save data very easily, read and write data. And there are other parts of our computers, for example, that are not so easy to get to have the data rewritten. Sometimes we'll need to go through a special process or get someone to actually do something for us to rewrite the data in a certain type of chip. And I think our subconscious mind is very much, or there are parts of the subconscious mind that are very much like some of these kind of firmware chips that are so deeply programmed that we need some special attention or maybe some special skills to reach them. And there are various things that can be done to help this, to reach these, like hypnotherapy, and there are various other techniques to distract the conscious mind to actually allow some new understanding to get into the subconscious mind. And there are lots of fantastic tools out there. If anyone is interested to find out some of these things, contact us and I could put you in touch with about one particularly effective method. But it's one thing having some assistance in this, but it's really just keeping a check on, am I dealing with an old attachment and then simply getting attached to something else that is kind of a bit like the old one that I've just dealt with, because we're constantly trying to hold on to something new all the time. This is kind of the way we maintain our stability, this kind of grasping. And we have to somehow try and grasp onto the right things, as I mentioned earlier, which is that sense of peace that we are, and that's the knowledge that we have.
Well, lovely answer, thank you.
So I'm sorry that was a long answer.
No, it was very explanative. Eric is probably the last question. Eric asks, I know you covered it, but he's asked the question: how does meditation help in this process of attachment and detachment?
Well, meditation, I mean, very often when we talk about meditation, particularly here actually, we're really, I think, talking about contemplation, which is about looking at our thoughts and observing our thoughts and directing our thoughts in the positive direction and checking for these, the sources of these sorrows. And then when we can see that this is a ridiculous idea, that we've been letting something upset us because we've been holding on to a false idea, it's only then we can become peaceful enough to meditate. So it's the contemplation that leads to the meditation. And if we remain in a state where we keep checking ourselves, we possibly have a chance of being able to go into meditation more easily. But the meditation itself, as a starting point, really is probably the best way to just sit with myself in silence and just see how I feel, why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and without some outside wisdom or knowledge to add to that, I could just go over and over my feelings and not know why I'm feeling that way. So if I couple that peaceful stillness and that time for myself, and add that little ingredient of checking where is that coming from, and it's okay, and just keep talking to myself really, really very kindly. And this is a tendency that many of us have, is to talk to our inner selves a bit roughly. So if we were to talk to ourselves more like a small child, that we're very, very careful of what we may say to them, maybe we might have a bit more chance of doing this reprogramming, because obviously the defenses would be down. We wouldn't be trying to maintain this. It would seem crazy, wouldn't it, to be in a meditative state and to be maintaining this brick wall of a false identity. So in meditation, we just have to let go and be very, very open and just accept that I am really open, and just look what's inside.
Okay, thank you ever so much. It sounds like a good lead in now to meditation. But before we do that, I'd just like to advertise next week's talk by Sarah Fitzgerald. It's called Being Positive Against the Growing Gloom. I think a nice title, I think, for all the problems that are facing us in the world today. So thank you very much, Al. It was a fantastic talk and really instructive and informative. So I hope you could take us now into a nice state of detachment and attachment, or away from attachment into detachment. So
Okay.
thank you very much, Al.
All right, let's just take a very, very brief journey. So if you can, sit up straight. And this is really just so that you can breathe freely and keep your mind clear. And also, it kind of gives a bit of a signal to the mind to be alert as well. If we slouch, then maybe our mind will slouch with it. But we want to be really straight, focused, but very, very chilled and relaxed. So imagine a miniature version of yourself that's sitting on the bridge of your nose. And it's kind of being subject to all of the changes and the wind, if you like, of the world around us, and the noise. Now, just behind this little version of the self, in the forehead, is a doorway. And this doorway is like a little portal away from the busy street, where I can just take one step back into silence. So stand at this doorway, now take one pace backwards into this silent place. Now, I am now in silence, and in front of me, I see the busy world still whizzing past. I see everything that's going on in the world, and I hear all the sounds, but I am actually in silence within myself and absolutely still. Now, from this silent place, I don't need to pretend to be anything. Nothing at all, only peaceful. That's all I have to do. So I just observe that I'm breathing naturally. Don't try and do anything particular. I just have to just be quiet and just observe that this busy world is just in front of me, but it can't reach me. And I am stillness. Now, as I retain this still place, this still posture, if you like, I can recall events that have been happening over the past week, maybe, and just see myself as like a puppet or a performer on a stage with people carrying out the script, playing their parts, just like actors, entertaining the audience. And I just watch what has happened and realize that I got just caught up. The play was just so engrossing that I thought it was something real, when it was all just a performance, like a mirror, to show me where my suffering is coming from, what my dependencies are, and what others are needing. So with this more accurate perspective, I can tune into my real self, which is that of a peaceful, loving, wise being. And this energy we refer to here as the soul, or the soul's energy. And just by being aware of who I am, I naturally resonate and radiate this feeling of stillness and peacefulness that is really what the world needs right now. All of this posturing and egos, I really need to see it like a big performance, that these poor souls just haven't understood what they came here for. But if I have understood, I can at least contribute some peace and some stillness. So whenever you can, just go into this silent room that's just behind your eyes and just know and remember who you really are. Om Shanti.